Hello and welcome to another Affinity photo tutorial, and this is going to be another adaptation of a Photoshop tutorial, and it's to get this sort of skeleton X-ray horror type image that you could use for maybe a poster for a film or a book or something like that. Now the original tutorial, Photoshop one, done by Blue Lightning TV. I will add a link to this in the description for this video if you want to see sort of how it was done, and maybe you may want to adapt it slightly differently. Now there is also links here to the skull image and the image of the lower bones below the skull. I'm not going to use those, but those are there if you want to try those images rather than the ones that I'm going to use. Now I've found this image here on Pixabay, which is just of the skull, and it is a PNG, so you don't have to worry about cutting it out. And the other image I've found is from KissPNG, and it has got more of the skeleton available. The only trouble is you've got this sort of outside edge, which may be a problem depending on your image and how you blend it, but again, you don't have to cut this out. Now the best shot you need is a full face on image, and if you can get the more of the shoulders in, it will help, because you can then use the lower part of the skeleton like I did in this second attempt with a different image. So I've got the spinal cord that comes below the skull here, and the trouble is with getting these sort of images is that a lot of the time you've got people's hands or arms and what have you in the images, like this one here, because this might be a good one to try, but the hand is it's very distracting, because unless you've got to put in the bones from the hand from another image, so finding an image that doesn't have hands or arms or what have you is a little bit more difficult. So the two images that I've used were this one and this one, both from Pixabay.com, and I will add links to these in the description. So let me just sort of clear away some of this and I'll be back in a tick. Okay, I've reset things, and I'm going to do this twice on both these images to use both of the different skull and skeleton images. And so the first part I will sort of hopefully do it a bit slower and sort of with more explanation, and the second one I will just sort of try and do it a bit quicker. Now in the Blue Lightning TV, the first step, he says, is to, if you have someone with dark hair or dark skin, is to first add a shadow and highlights adjustment and raise the shadows so it becomes brighter. I think mainly because when we invert it, those dark areas will become nearer to white, so it just sort of to darken it down a bit. But I personally quite liked the sort of dark white hair and what have you, to make the effect more effective to me, so I'm not going to bother with that step. But if you want to include that step, then you could add the shadows and highlights adjustment first. So what we need to do is to select the person. So I'm going to use the selection brush, make sure it's on add, and then just select this. As you don't have to be too 100% brilliant at making a selection, mainly because it's all going to be sort of inverted and made into sort of an X-ray image, and then you've got to put something over the top of it, so it's not all going to show up that brilliantly, so I'm going to just get a rough idea. I think that's there. And then I'll just do a quick refine just to get a few of those hairs at the top there. And maybe that one there. I don't think there's much else really. No, so once you've refined and selected as much as you want, when it comes down to output, come down to new layer and click apply. So that will turn off the background layer, so you just have this layer that we've selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to turn on the background layer, I'm just going to highlight it and then come to the add pixel layer, so it will put that behind this layer that we have visible. And then I'm going to flood fill this with a light grey. Now for ease of use, I'm just going to use the greys option that is in the color selector, and I'm going to probably not come above 30% black, so 25-30, and then just flood fill the background. And then I'm going to add noise from the filter menu, so filter, noise, add noise, and I'm going to put it at about 70% and then just click apply. So we have a sort of a nice grainy background. So now I'm going to highlight the image of the person that we have up here, and then I'm going to come down to the adjustment icon, which is this half black and white circle one here, and I'm going to come up to invert. Now this is going to, because it's now placed above all the other layers, it is inverting everything. I just want it to invert this layer, so I need to click and hold on the icon for this adjustment and drag it down and into the layer below, so that blue line just comes up to the edge of the icon for the layer, and when you let go it will drop that into and make it a child of that layer, so it is now only affecting this image and not the grainy background. Now as you can see, this has inverted it with color, so I want to change this into black and white. So as this layer is already highlighted, if I add another adjustment, it will add it above this layer and it will still be grouped in with the overall group for this image. So I'm going to add a black and white adjustment. So again, down to the adjustment icon and black and white. Now the thing here, if it was like a normal non-inverted picture, you'd probably alter the reds and yellows to alter skin tones and what have you, but because it's inverted, it's sort of like the reverse, so blues will affect the skin tones more than sort of any of the reds will. So if you want to make your image darker or lighter in the skin areas, you need to use the blue sliders rather than reds and yellows. I mean, you could try reds and yellows will affect, so that is affecting the hair more than the skin. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that, so I can now close that. So now we have a sort of basic X-ray image. So I'm going to highlight the top layer of that group, and then this is when we want to add the skull image, and for this one I'm just going to use the image that is just the skull. So I'm going to right click on this and copy, come back to my main image and then edit and paste. and come to the move tool. I'm just going to roughly put it in the center of this image here, and then come to one of the corners, hold down the control key or command key, I think it is on a Mac, and then just click and hold and drag it out until it's roughly the size of this gentleman's face. And what I will do is lower the opacity of this down to about 50% so you can see the image behind. And it's probably, I personally would go with getting the eyes in the eye socket, or maybe the nose area, cavity where the nose is on your image. And yes, I'm sort of roughly happy with where that is. So now it's a case of we're going to be moving this around a bit. So what we're going to do for this is come to the Mesh Warp tool. Now it is found in this menu. It's got the perspective tool as well, but it is the Mesh Warp tool that we want, and that will convert this into a box with a white line going all the way around it and nodes in each corner. Now what we need to do is to sort of stretch and move this skeleton image so it fits better on the particular image that you have. Now to do that, I mean, I know nothing about anatomy, so I really don't know whereabouts the correct points are that this skeleton would fit onto a person's face, but I'm going to be going roughly that these two divots that come out the side here is roughly around where the ears are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to sort of roughly in line where that is on that bit that's sticking out there, and I'm going to double click on the line, and that will put a line going across the image. So I can now click one of these nodes and just drag these out a bit better. You do also have handles here, so you can just alter these eye sockets maybe a bit better, and you do, and not, it doesn't always happen, but sometimes you'll get handles that will appear because you've added a line. You can sort of adjust, you know, the other areas. No, I don't have a handle here, but you can just click on the line and drag it out to suit the sort of shape of the head. I think I'll just click and drag this skull down slightly. It's probably too high by the amount of hair that's there. Now you will, when you're moving these around, you probably will alter something that you want, that you had in place at one point and is now moved, but happy there. So probably the only last thing to do is get the teeth in place. So I will sort of come roughly to the top of the teeth, and then I'll double click over here to put another line going across, and then I'll just move those teeth up and more in line to where this gentleman's lips were. So really it's just the last thing is the chin and cheek areas. So I'm going to put a line about there, I think, just to sort of protect this area so I don't move this by mistake. And then I can just bring these areas out a bit, maybe bring that up slightly to where his chin was. Right, yes, I'm quite happy with that, I think. So once you are happy, just click apply. Now you can bring the opacity back up or a bit further down. If I remember correctly, in the Photoshop tutorial he brought it down to about 40%, and which obviously makes the skull less visible and the person behind more visible. Depends on the sort of result you're going for. So I will do the same there, but like I said, if you want the skull to be more visible, you may want to increase that opacity. So what we need now is a colour above this. So what we're going to do is add a new pixel layer, and we're going to flood fill this with a green, which is what he did in the Photoshop tutorial. I think it was a darkish green, so I'm just going to sort of come somewhere down here. So what's this? This hex code is 31A609, and then just flood fill that solid, and then it's just a case of changing the blend mode to, I believe it was hard light he picked. So again, you could always reduce the opacity of that green. So it's like that. That's about 80%. That is. You could, if you then wanted to add, say, where is it? Brightness and contrast adjustment, and then you could sort of make that brighter, a bit darker, depending on what you want to achieve with your particular image. Now, it wasn't included in the tutorial, the Photoshop tutorial, but if you are going for a poster or magazine cover or something like that, you could then sort of above this, you could add some text. Let's go with a colour. Let's go with let's try a yellow maybe. There we go, we got sort of magazine cover. So that would be the end of the tutorial. You can save this under a new name. And so I will now move on to the second image, and then we're going to try and use this skeleton rather than the other one. So hopefully do this a bit quicker. Make a selection of the gentleman. Right, then do a quick refine. Output to a new layer. Add a new layer below. Flood fill this with, I'll try 25% this time. Add noise, about 70%. Then invert. drag that down into that layer, add the black and white adjustment, adjust to suit your tastes. That will do. Then copy and paste that image in. Resize to fit. Now in this case here, what I am going to do is I'm just going to try and get rid of those ears on the side of the skull, because you wouldn't have ears on a skull, and I've already got ears on this particular chap's image. I mean, if you wanted, you could sort of get rid of this outer sort of skin image, but it's just those ears which I found most distracting. So I'll come back to lower the opacity down to 50% ish, so I can resize a bit better. Let's try that about there, roughly. Let me just zoom out a sec. Then I can come to the mesh warp tool, and again I'm going to come to roughly where what I consider the ears are, and then just nudge this out slightly that way, slightly that way. The eye sockets are not too bad. And the nose is not too bad. Let's have a look. Let me zoom into those teeth. Just lower the opacity slightly. Yeah, so I think I'll double click about there. Just because I think his mouth is down there somewhere. Right, and then we've got one for the jawline. So his jaw will be about let's try that there. I think I'll just bring that eye socket that way. Right, I'm sort of roughly happy with where that is sitting. So click apply, zoom back out. Now again, I can come to the erase tool and maybe just get rid of that outline of the body from the skeleton image. So it brings back but I don't want to go too close to the spine because I want that in the image. Right, so yes, that's not too bad. Now I can alter the opacity of how much I want this to show. So let's go with about, make this one a bit higher than I did the last one. Let's go with about 55% roughly. and then it's just a case of adding the new layer, flood filling it. Now this time I'm going to try it with a different colour. Let's try a red, and this is where it's probably a good idea to sort of try out the different blend modes. I mean, just because Blue Lightning TV used the hard light, the other blend modes can give you some really good effects. I mean, colour burn, so that's lighten, that gives you sort of a more brighter, eerie effect. Screen is quite good as well. Which one's there? Soft light, again quite good. Now hard light doesn't seem to work too well with this red image, I don't know quite why. Difference, exclusion, average is quite good. Colour, so pick one that works for you, and the image and the effect, I mean, even that is quite eerie. I mean, contrast and negate. I think the one I liked most was either screen or lighten. Let's go with screen. See, again, you can always lower the opacity of that red, but again I'm just going to add the text, and my sort of go-to font for these sort of posters is Attack. So and then we got a second cover for this new magazine that I've just suddenly designed. There we go. So there's two sort of versions on how you can get this sort of skeleton horror type image. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.